Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to rank the people from this new diversity era, which only consists of, as I'm recording this, Big Brother 23, Big Brother 24, and Big Brother 25. I've done Game Clarity rankings for all three of those seasons, so you know where I rank all of them based solely on their season, but combining all three of the seasons, that is where the interest happens. You can watch my prior coverage of Big Brother seasons up above here, and let's just get right to it. I'm going to use the 7 tiers that I have always used, which is abysmal, bad, potential, mediocre, solid, good, and great. Let's just get right to it. So at 49th, which is dead last, is Luke from Big Brother 25. I don't have much to say about him. He was not in an alliance on a season that had two sides and alliances, had a really poor social game, and he was really not grasping the strategic elements of the season. And worst of all, he ended up getting expelled before the first eviction even happened. He really didn't know what he was doing, and I have no faith in him in general. So here he is. So at 48 is Pooch from Big Brother 24. He was approached to be in the majority alliance, but was kicked out in like a day because they found him so annoying and unlikable. He spent too much time on the guys to the point where the guys' alliance was even fake, and also to the point where he had no relationships with most of the women in the house. Outside of being one of the people who pushed for Taylor to go up in the first week, he decided to volunteer to go on the block on his own, where he was already a target, which he didn't even know about, and convinced himself that he was upon the entire week, even ignoring warnings that Joseph was giving him. I don't have faith in Pooch doing better in most seasons, so here he is. So at 47th is Paloma from Big Brother 24. She seemed like someone who could have ran the season for a bit, based on the 1 week that she was in the house. At the same time, Paloma was using alpha fuel early on, where she would have burnt out strategically eventually anyways, probably sooner than later, especially since people were already starting to get annoyed with her, and she built up way too much paranoia. Despite having some sway and relationships, she cannot keep it together long enough where she decided to quit before the first eviction even happened because her mental health went downhill. Even if that didn't happen, she probably would have went home the first week due to the twist, but she would have been twist screwed instead, which would have actually kind of helped her case. All of that, in addition to her lack of accountability and self-reflection on anything, causes me to think she would continue to be burnt out on most seasons. 46th is Frenchie from Big Brother 23. He ends up winning HOH the first week and makes a bunch of promises to the house guests, which he cannot keep up with, like not nominating all the people of color and women. Of course, he broke those and then started making a bunch of alliances, while also turning people off with his antics. While he would have been safe for like a week or two, had other people won the week 2 HOH instead of Kyland, he did get a bad HOH result, completely outed his alliance, and then spent the rest of the week plotting about the position he put himself into while doing absolutely nothing to stay. I don't really see Frenchie being able to do anything differently on another season, and he had little to no positive attributes as a player in general, so here he is. At 45th is Brent from Big Brother 23. Right from the beginning of the season, he was struggling a lot socially, and a lot of people did want him out. Even Frenchie wanted him out, but Brent was able to convince him to do otherwise, which is the only other positive. He seemed to have a lack of self awareness of what was really happening in the house and overestimated his position in the house, where he thought that he would have been fine with losing Frenchie and that the slaughterhouse was a real thing. Brent was not an impressive competitor in the few weeks he was in the house. He was atrocious socially throughout the season, and while he had a feeling Xavier was giving him crap, he didn't realize that everyone was giving him crap, and he could not adapt. He needed to do better in making other allies or ensuring the slaughterhouse stayed together, and he doesn't have the awareness of his flaws to do better. At 44th is Kristen from Big Brother 25. There was a bit of unluckiness with people being nominated right off the jump due to the competitions, which she lost, and that caused her to do the most in her first 2 days of the house. At the same time, she still handled it pretty poorly, had a poor read on what happened in the house, even after she was evicted, and that she was safe for most of the week, despite everyone avoiding talking to her. She probably could do a bit better under different circumstances, but there was nothing there strategically. She wasn't good socially and was a mixed bag regarding the competitions, as she almost won the veto that week. There really isn't anything good about her, but there are some unlucky circumstances that didn't have me putting her lower. At 43rd is Travis from Big Brother 23. So he's in the same ballpark as Kirsten, with some unlucky circumstances, causing him to be booted first, but it wasn't due to a twist with him. Frankie promised Travis safety on the first date, if I remember correctly, but that meant nothing because it's Frankie, who wanted to take out a white young guy, but couldn't take out the other ones for many reasons. Then the target was supposed to be Derek X, but he won the veto, which caused for Travis to go up. At the same time, Travis was not building relationships with most of the house guests, as he just clung onto Derek X. He was not thinking strategically whatsoever at all, and he didn't even campaign when he was on the block. He didn't care about the game, wasn't really good in any of the categories for the game, and I don't see him improving if he was on another season. At 42nd is Indy from Big Brother 24. It says a lot that I have a juror that is this low on the list, even over some really bad pre-jurors that I will definitely get to. Ultimately, Indy doesn't have any sense of skills that are needed for the game. While she was not awful socially, she was not good either, as she was seen as too all over the place, and she did have a language barrier that definitely hindered her throughout the season. She had no strategic insight whatsoever, as she thought that the show was going to be similar to Big Brother Brazil, which is a popularity vote by audience, and was pretty poor in competitions. She was not even in the main alliance of the house, and was on the outs of the Girls Girls alliance, but only got moved up in that alliance when some of the higher people in that alliance got booted, and they needed to hold on to any number that they could. She did try to make that alliance with Joseph and Kyle, but she mainly just followed Jasmine and Osa throughout the game, who aren't good players, and went home in a week where the HOH did not want her gone. She has no respect in the house as a player, so there's no way she's winning a jury vote, and I don't really think she has any ability to improve as a player, so here she is. At 41st is Hassam from Big Brother 25. While he is still on the lowest tier, I am shocked that he is not lower on this tier. Hassam really struggled socially from the beginning, as he spent most of his time in the gym by himself and was only brought into the Professor's Alliance because they needed him as a number. Because of his personality, people saw him as the leader of that side, and due to not wanting to work with the younger people, he was always a main target on his side of the house. He won way too many competitions. He won a veto, an HOH, and a veto consecutively, and his alliance did not like how he was trying to dictate things for them, which caused them to want him out. It was stupid that his alliance turned on him, though he wasn't blameless, and he was able to convince them, for the most part, to keep him, but he should not have been there to begin with. While he has some pluses, I don't know if he can really improve his huge social holes, even though he wasn't the worst strategically and he was very good competitively. So the final person in this tier at 40th is Cameron from Big Brother 25. It really shouldn't be shocking as to why he's on this tier, but despite that, I will say that he did play a decent enough week 1. He was a part of the Riley side of the house and was in a pretty good position there until he got cold feet and sold them out for no real reason, which turned off the other side as well, so he kind of just ended up having no solid alliance. He was nominated during the next 2 weeks and was very close to going home, where the only reason why he stayed both rounds was due to nothing of his own doing. He won HOH the 4th week and did not use it to the best of his ability, as he targeted the people at the bottom and let Red talk him into making a poor move in not going after Izzy. He won the veto after being nominated the very next week, where he would have went home otherwise, used an HOH, or one HOH, and accidentally made the good move of booting Izzy when he wanted Flushagon the entire week, and he was booted the very next week. He was lucky that there was a returning twist during the week that he was booted, and even then, he just won an HOH, allowed himself to be played by Matt and Jag, and was booted again to barely make it to the jury portion of the season. Cameron is great at competitions and overestimated his strategic abilities to the point of not listening to people, and he was atrocious socially, which was his huge issue. Due to all these huge flaws, I think this season was his highest ceiling, and he would do worse on most seasons. So the first person in this tier from Big Brother 25 at 39th is Riley. She's a very weird one, since there are arguments for putting her in any of the 3 bottom tiers, but I do think her skill set, or lack thereof, is more fitting for her to be here. Riley was able to win the first HOH and had the easiest HOH ever, as she didn't even have to nominate anyone, but just saved 2 of the nominees. But she exposed her alliance to everyone in the house, not because she hung out with her alliance all the time in the HOH room, but because she literally told people on the other side who her alliance is. Due to this, she was a pretty big target, but I do think if some of the other professors went HOH, she would have been safe that week. Hisam really wanted her out, and Riley did have a path to make it through that week, since all of her allies would have vetoed her, and the other professors did want to keep her, as well as her allies, of course. I think she has social potential, and is decent enough competitively, but her strategic game is that poor, where I have no choice but to put her here. At 38th is Red from Big Brother 25. Honestly, I don't have a lot to say about him, and don't want to have a lot to say about him in general. He was on the outs for a lot of the first week, but was brought into the Professor's Alliance because they needed numbers. But despite him being loyal to them, they never trusted or wanted him to last long, which was dumb on their part. Red was close to Cameron, who was pretty much the pariah of the house, so neither side of the house really wanted to work with him, and he was pushed out of his own alliance. Red kept on ignoring all of the signals and signs of his poor positioning in the house, and he convinced Cameron not to backdoor Izzy, when it would have benefited the both of them game-wise. And then he was pawned out of the house on his last week, where he believed Cameron threw him under the bus just because Jared, of all people, told him so. There's nothing there strategically. He wasn't strong socially, though he wasn't awful, and won a competition throughout the season, so he wasn't really notable in that regard either. I don't think he has the capability of being a better player, and he played poorly here, so here he is. At 37th is Daniel from Big Brother 24. Like I mentioned in the BB24 videos, there was a huge argument that can be made for him being in the Abysmal tier. Despite winning the very first HOH, he was not involved in any of the main alliances, but automatically assumed that he was, despite spending his entire HOH week with Nicole all alone. Nicole was able to make some inroads and told Daniel all about it, and when the leftovers was formed, he was kind of grouped with the other side of the house, where they did somewhat rely on him. Unfortunately for him, the leftovers remained in power, and while he was able to figure out who was in the alliance, he made a lot of dumb moves. He decided to use the veto, even though he was told that Nicole would go home, and then she ended up going home. The other side that he was grouped in with had very little relationships with him, so he ended up by himself very quickly, and he overestimated his position in the game, where he kind of felt like crapping on Taylor would integrate him more with the house, but it did the complete opposite. Daniel is a mess strategically and knows enough about the game, which is why he is in this tier and not in the Abysmal tier, but is awful socially, is okay competitively, and is too arrogant / lacks any self-awareness to acknowledge his faults to improve as a player. 36th is Terrence from Big Brother 24. He is someone who I feel like performed at his best potential showing on this season and would do worse on most other seasons. Terrence immediately struggled to make bonds with people, which is why he was nominated and was close to throwing in the towel that week. He really was not brought into any of the main alliances for the first few weeks of the season and was consistently pawned throughout the season since people saw him as expendable and he was going to be safe. When he did get strategically active in making allies and moves, they were never really good ones. Like bonding with outsiders like Daniel and Nicole, who were kind of on their way out of the house, plotting to stay on the block against Monty and Joseph, where he would have went home in that case. Terrence was only able to win 8 because of the twist that week, and he did use it fine enough, though once he went back into the house after the twist was over, he really went back to the position that he was in before his HOH, and he was easily picked off. Terrence didn't know what was happening in the house. He was pretty poor socially, had no respect in the house, so no chance of winning a vote, and he was relatively meh in competitions. At 35th is Brittany from Big Brother 23. Honestly, I was not impressed with her whatsoever, and I did consider putting her in the Abysmal tier when rewatching the season. Brittany was on the outs from the very beginning, since she spent most of her time with Frenchie, Azza, and Derek F. during the first few weeks of the season, when none of them had any social capital. Due to this, she ended up being on the block quite a bit as a pawn, which caused her to whine and cry because of her entitlement while she didn't do anything to put herself in a good position. The house did not see her as a threat, so she was not going to be targeted, and while she did end up making a deal with Christian, she decided to send him home over Sarah Beth, when it was better for her to keep him around, so she didn't even make good decisions during the few times she had the opportunity to have agency for herself. She never repaired her relationship with Kyland and ended up going home the next week. And while that was because of the cook strategy, Brittany had no chance in winning, wasn't good in competitions, as she performed poorly outside of the one that she actually won. She wasn't good socially and sucked strategically. She doesn't seem like the type who has any accountability or enough to learn from her mistakes, so here she is. So at 34th is Izzy from Big Brother 25. What's interesting about Izzy is that compared to a lot of people in this tier, she actually had a lot of power, though all of that was in virtue through Suri. She was able to get into the Fields family, and she was able to get them to be loyal to her since she knew their secret and was in a lot of alliances with them, especially the Bye Bye Bitches and the Professor's Alliance. The issue with Izzy is that her social game was poor, since she was a huge target from the other side of the house, and she made a lot of social faux pas with people who were actually on her side. She made the dumb choice to target Hassam, who would have protected her over the field, and I believe they had a final two together, turning on Red, who was also very loyal to the group and wouldn't have come after her. He actively prevented Cameron from going after her on Cameron's HOH and alienating Corey, while being way too scatterbrained. While she was close to winning some competitions in the season, she couldn't pull off a win. She was pretty poor socially and was not good strategically, clearly. What's even worse is that she was never playing for herself to win, and actively ruined any sort of agency that she could have had for herself. So with that, as well as her lack of accountability in general, earned her this spot on this tier. At 33rd is Jasmine from Big Brother 24. Like Indy, she really was not a part of the main alliances during the early part of the season, as she was not in the post-pack alliance, and while she was a part of the girls' alliance, that was the fake alliance, or at least in the first week. She thought that she was in a much better position than she was, and she had to be convinced to take out the Pooch over Taylor, which was better for her game. Of course, in the third week, Jasmine's game changed for the worse, as her closest ally in Amira was booted, and she was put in the bottom of the house for the rest of her time in the game. While Jasmine was a good liar, she was not aware of what was happening, and her initial good went away as she annoyed more and more of the house guests. People didn't really care for her injury anymore and thought that she was actively playing it up, and she was good in competitions overall, despite her one HOH win, and some might even say that was a fluke. Jasmine was kind of just sitting there until she was taken out in the early jury portion of the season. While she was more aware than some of her other allies, and she wasn't as catastrophic as Nicole and Daniel, or as threatening as they were, she was really out of the loop for pretty much the entire season. And while she was kind of the leader of her group after a while, I don't really see her evolving her gameplay at all, and she really didn't show a whole lot, so here she is. So at 32nd is Jared from Big Brother 25. I honestly thought that he was going to be lower than this, and there is an argument for him to be lower. Jared had all of the benefits to do well in this game. He had his mother in the house with him, who is a legend at social, strategic, reality shows, and the house did not know about this connection. The younger alliance wanted to work with him, and he had connections to the older alliance via his mother, so he could have just chilled on that and let it carry him through at least the first two-thirds of the season. The issue with Jared is that he wanted to have control to the point where he wouldn't listen to his mother at times. He told way too much information to people like Corey and Blue, which was eventually used against him. He also spread too many lies to the house guests, like unnecessarily meddling with Brett and Cameron, and spoke way too much, like telling Jag that he knew about Matt saving him when Jared was specifically told by his mother to not tell anyone. He came off as domineering at times, and while he was able to build a lot of relationships in the season, he could not maintain it as he actively ruined a lot of those relationships, and he heavily contributed to the downfall of his alliance. Jared was pretty good at competitions since he won a decent amount, but he cannot get over his messiness. While he did take accountability for his actions, which has me thinking maybe he would improve from his faults if he's on another season, I don't know if he would be physically able to actually execute the things that he needed to improve on, or he would need to improve on another season. At 31st is Nicole from Big Brother 24. She's someone that I felt like had some promise, but ultimately was too messy, and I guess that's where I have a lot of people in this area on this specific tier. Nicole was tied to Daniel in the first week, which caused her to be a bit too isolated, as she was one of the few girls who was not attached to the Girls Alliance and was not really in many alliances during that week, despite being in the powerful position of aligning with the HOH. But something changed in the second week, where she was approached to be a part of the post-pack alliance, though that was kind of random, and she did get closer to most of the women in the house, where her position did improve. The post-pack did start falling apart, with Monty and Kyle being on the out, but it did cause the dynamics in the house to shift, and Nicole was definitely a big part of that, though it was negative, as they felt like she was too aggressive, and a drama with Taylor did not help. Once the blindside happened, Nicole was stuck with Daniel and stuck out like a sore thumb, where she volunteered to go on the block, thinking that she was safe, and she ended up going home, though she was the target that week anyways. I do think Nicole is a bit too stubborn at times and isn't as flexible, but she did realize that there was another alliance and was decent enough in competitions and seemed to take some accountability for her actions, so I do think she could improve. But in general, from what she showed, here she is. At 30th is Whitney from Big Brother 23. I really don't have a whole lot to say about her, since she's a forgettable house guest in general and didn't do much during her time in the season. It did seem like she got along with the majority of the house guests, though it was in a very shallow way, but she wasn't pissing people off, actively at least, and was laying low. She was brought into the slaughterhouse and did intend on being loyal to them, but the issue is that alliance was led by a net of her house guests and it fell apart almost immediately, which had nothing to do with Whitney. The issue is she didn't pivot whatsoever, and it caused her to be on the outs, since everyone else that was not in the cookout was attached to someone in the cookout. Everyone but Whitney. It made her an easy target, and when she was on the block, she did nothing to stay. I do think Whitney had an idea about strategy and the game, but she was not able to make strong enough bonds with people, was extremely passive, and some people were rubbed the wrong way by her, and I don't really see her improving on most seasons. I know some people would feel like she should be on the potential tier, since she's kind of similar to a lot of those pre-jury women who go but had some sort of promise, but I felt like she didn't have as much promise as many other women I put in that tier, and she would have an issue with executing whatever she wanted, and she never really did much to show that she had that extra potential to put her up there. So at 29th is the winner of Big Brother 25 in Jag. I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that I was ever going to end up putting a winner on the bad tier. Even the lower tier winners that I've talked about in BBUS and BB Can ended up in the mediocre tier. Heck, I think that's even the case for Total Drama. But that was before Jag became a Big Brother house guest. It seemed like he was going to do well, since he made an 8-person alliance and he had a good idea with the Onion Alliance. But the execution of that Onion Alliance caused the foundation to be very poor, and he spent damn near all of his time with his alliance for the first 2 weeks of the season. Due to this, it caused him to be on the out when Riley's structure fell apart very quickly, and he was so stuck on the pre-game plan that he had with this huge alliance that he couldn't adapt to the dynamics at all. He was in a fake alliance, which wasn't known to him, with the sweet side of the house, and they sent him home early, where, after coming back, he volunteered to go on the block for the alliance again, right after they voted him out, and they're intending on voting him out that week again, but he was spared due to nothing of his own doing. I dogged him, as well as other people who were evicted and then come back heavily for being booted pre-jury and then returning, where he only returned due to a twist that was only offered during that specific week of the season, where Matt saved him. And after that, he played poorly, as he was given poor read after poor read, and then things did turn around for him with the Izzy vote, though he had little to nothing to actively do with that. Jack was able to build alliances with Cameron and Boy Jane in the second half of the season and had other relationships due to Matt's connections to those people, like Suri and Felicia, though he did build his own bonds with America and Corey. After this, Jag mainly just won competitions, so he was immune for all but one round throughout the jury portion, and him being allowed to play in back-to-back HOHs is bullshit. And he was ready to take Matt to the end, thinking that he would lose to him. Jack's social game was a mixed bag at best, and while Jack did get better strategically, he still was not good, had iffy jury management and a poker face, and his main strength was competitions. He had an issue with accountability throughout the season, and there are so many factors that caused him to even make it that far in the first place. And I still think that his inadaptability would cause him to do poorly on most seasons, in addition to all of the other stuff. So at 28th is Blue from Big Brother 25. It was clear to me that Blue was someone who came into the game with the main goal of increasing her social media following, and with that in mind, it put some of her behavior and actions in the game into perspective. She got closer to the younger side of the house and ended up in the Riley Alliance, which was a good position to be in, if only it did not fall apart almost instantly. Due to that, she was at the bottom of the house, and a lot of people on the other side of the house did not like Blue, and a lot of people wanted to target her. I do think a showmatch with Jared helped her get over that early target, and it caused the Cerise side of the house to ease up on her, since she could be workable, and there were other threats that needed to be dealt with first. During this time, Blue was always trying to do certain things, like making pictures on who needed to go, planting seeds, and trying to get agency for herself, so she wasn't passive at all. The issue is, she might have played a better game had she been more passive, since her allies in Matt and Jag did not take her seriously and started actively losing trust with her due to what she was doing, and not even Jared did either, and due to her allegiances with both, it caused her to be put in a bad position, and then it weakened. She got too obsessed with targeting America and Corey, as it blinded her, and it was impressive to see her get closer to Suri and Felicia, but she was too blind about Matt and Jag's game, and all that bit her in the butt. Blue was not good in competitions from what I remembered. Outside of the one that she won, she was poor strategically and was all over the place socially. And I don't think she's a mediocre player or has a higher ceiling to have more potential. So she is on the higher end of the bad tier just due to her messiness. At 21st is Derek F from Big Brother 23. Alrighty, I don't know if this placement will shock some people or not, since he is known for being a really bad player. But he also made it to the final two, but I do think he benefited from there being so many poor players in this era, which may be more than normal compared to the other three eras, but I've had to look at those to see. Derek was not a part of the major or the alliances that were forming in the house at this point, since he clung heavily to Frenchie and Brittany, who were not doing well socially in the house. Luckily for him, there was the agreement of the cookout that became an alliance later on, where they agreed to not target one another. Due to this, he sat back for the first half of the season while not making a lot of meaningful relationships with people, hence him not getting involved in the main dynamics, but would then complain when Frenchie was sent home or when Brittany was consistently nominated. He was never going to be booted pre-jury, and no one was threatened by him. But his name came up a lot when he was nominated during the first week in jury, where a lot of the house guests wanted him booted, since he's an obvious goat. But he stayed due to the cookout. His alliance did have his back, but it was an outside factor that the other side cannot piece together for various reasons, which is why he stayed. And even after that, he continued picking fights with people in his alliance, made several emotional moves throughout the season, and then pissed off Asa enough at the end for claiming that he carried her there, which isn't true, and it caused her to actively choose to not take him to the final two because of it. He thought he was a mastermind, but had little to no idea of what was going on, was very emotional throughout the season, his social game was not all that, though it wasn't the absolute worst, and he was horrible in competitions. Despite that, I do think he would do better on another season, based on his postseason behavior and actually taking a lot of accountability, though that was mainly for his actions and not his actual gameplay, if that makes sense. Final person in this tier at 26th is Asa from Big Brother 23. For some reason, people act like Asa is a much better player than Derek, and I just don't see it. She also did not get involved in the dynamics of the season, especially earlier on, since the alliances that were controlling the first part of the season she had nothing to do with, as she sat around isolating herself with Derek F and Brittany, but complained when Brittany was always on the block. It even got to the point where she volunteered to go on the block several times throughout the first half of the season, since she was so annoyed with the strategy and social element of the season, and things weren't going her way, and this was despite her being protected by the coquette. Asa had this entitlement about her, where she would get annoyed with her allies for being better positioned throughout the season, and felt entitled that certain HOHs should be given to her, and ultimately weren't given to her. I will say that she did spend some time building relationships with people as the season went on, though those relationships never turned into strategic relationships, but it did make her more respected for her transparency and being an empath, where she could win in a few circumstances. She did get more agency once she won HOH during the Final Five, though I don't know if she made the best decision with her HOH, made it through the Final Four due to nothing of her own doing, and actively changed her mind to want to take the one person she could not beat at the end, i.e., Xavier, over the person she could beat at the end due to Derek annoying her. On other seasons, I could see her being booted a lot earlier due to being on the out and a lack of active strategizing, and I don't see her playing any differently on another season. And in addition to that, she also was just really poor in competitions. I don't see her improving, hence her being at the top of this tier. So there's not many people in this tier, and the first person in this tier at 25th is Christian from Big Brother 23. He does fall under certain pitfalls of certain pre-jurors and early jurors, winning way too many competitions where most of those wins were pointless, not being the most strategic, and needing to be led. He was one of Frenchie's top targets of the white men that needed to be booted, but he won the safety competition that prevented him from being nominated. He did get close to his teammates and started building relationships with people outside of the group, like with people like Tiffany and Brittany, which is a good thing. I do think that once he got into an official showmatch with Alyssa, his social game started to weaken and he focused more on that. But he was the only person out of the early boot who had a lot of good relationships with people, especially in the cookout. Christian won a bunch of competitions that he did not need to win. He misused his H8 in targeting someone who was not coming after him and that he needed in the house, and was too focused on the Royal Flush Alliance to realize that he was becoming a huge target, where there was a good chance that T or someone from his team would have went home had he not won that HOH. I will say that he came very close to staying in his final week, and showed some gameplay potential during that week, and he was the first person to campaign while on the block that season. Where I do think he would do a lot better if he was on another season, but he's just too naive and still an earlier boot, so here he is. At 24th is Amira from Big Brother 24. She is someone who seemed like she was going to run the game and was very impressive since she knew nothing about the show before being recruited a few months before the season started. Amira was in the Postpac Alliance and was able to form a girls' alliance on the side that I forgot the name of, but she was involved in both groups. Amira was the one who convinced Jasmine to target Pooch over Taylor so they can weaken not just the boys, showing how powerful she was and the sway she had in the house, but also to limit Monty and Cal's options, where she did have good relationships with them, where she had a final two with Monty and she might have had one with Cal too, but I'm not too sure on that. The issue with Amir is that she was very visible with how powerful she was, and she wasn't stealthy in her moves, so people started seeing it and they caught on to her pretty quickly. And addition she would not speak to people that she wasn't aligned with, while not managing her allies their very best, so things just kind of fell apart for her. Then she was blindsided due to the formation of the Leftovers Alliance, though it could be argued that the Paris twist screwed her over somewhat that week, where I think Nicole would have went home that week if it was just a normal individual week. But Amira's time was coming to an end soon afterwards once that alliance was made. I do think she would perform better on another season, as long as she learned to pace herself better. And the final person in this tier at 23rd is Sarah Beth. I had no idea where to put Sarah Beth when I ranked her with the BB23 cast tier ranking. I don't think she was particularly a bad player, but I don't think she was mediocre either, so putting her in this tier with a few early jurors who are just all over the place made sense, which I've done with other early B jurors in prior eras. It seemed like Sarah Beth wanted to play an under the radar game, and she was successful at doing that for the first week or two. That did not work out eventually because she threw her allies with Claire and Tiffany under the bus to Kylan, which ruined those relationships, and she really wasn't close with her teammates Xavier, Alyssa, and Christian. Sarah Beth was essentially the fringe member of the Royal Flush Alliance, and there's a huge push to vote her out, but she stayed due to factors not of her own doing or control. She had no idea of the target that was on her, partially due to Tiffany's jealousy, but also due to her prior relationships, and she overtly relied on Kylan, who convinced her to take out Derek Eggs in bad faith, and he obviously wasn't going to have her back due to the cookout. Obviously, the cookout was a huge hurdle blocking her potential in the season, but I also think she was more flawed than most of the other non-cookout jurors. So here she is, and I don't know if she would do better or worse based on what we saw here if she was on another season. So the first person in this tier at 22nd is Nicole from Big Brother 25. It was a struggle to realize where I should put Nicole, since I could easily put her in the bad tier, and I thought about putting her in the potential tier. But I don't think she has untapped potential, and I don't think she really played poorly. Obviously, her being a pre-juror is a slight against her, but people who lasted as long as she did and placed where she placed ends up being an early juror on most seasons. Nicole ended up being in two alliances that cross-contaminated. I guess not cross-contaminated, but they worked together essentially, like the Bye Bye Bitches and the Professor's Alliance. And she was not the leader of these alliances, so she was not getting a bunch of flack for it. Nicole intentionally played under the radar and seemed to have a bunch of solid enough reads. At the same time, she was too under the radar, to the point where her allies started distrusting her at various points in the season, and she rejected the other side, trying to make relationships with her at various points. It all led up to her being sent home as a pawn, and Nicole was just too passive and refused to have any agency in the game. She was very intentional with what she did in the game, and I could see her lasting a while again, but Nicole just needs to be more active in her relationships and strategy. Kind of mixed socially and strategically, and was met competitively, so she's at the bottom of this tier. At 21st is Alyssa from Big Brother 24. Watching her trajectory in the season was kind of interesting. In the first week of the season, she seemed like the right-hand woman of Paloma, where the two of them would run the season, as she gave her input in a lot, was in many alliances that gave them control, and she was well positioned. Things then turned around when her power structure fell apart because she told Kyle about her side alliances and the girls' alliance. And she did this because she was just rambling, so there's no real reason towards it. Alyssa never connected the dots that it was all her fault, and when things failed, Alyssa was on the outs and had no idea what was going on afterwards. People wanted to target her, but she was protected by Kyle, and she didn't make relationships with people like Turner and even Terrence, so I think her social skills saved her quite a bit. She really did nothing notable for most of the season, but the week one Alyssa kind of popped up again in her final week, where she was able to get Brittany on her side and made a lot of convincing arguments as to why she should stay. She was inconsistent at best strategically, outright poor when she was not being led by someone, and was poor in competitions, but I do think she has social potential, which saved her from being in the bad tier, and I really see her getting booted early on most seasons. At 20th is Bowie Jane from Big Brother 25. I don't have much to say about Bowie Jane, despite her making it to the final three. She kind of had the indie syndrome of telling people that she did not want to talk game with people for the first few weeks of the season, which caused people to distance themselves from her. Unlike Indy, Bowie Jane did have her alliances, and was in a good enough position, as she was in the Bye Bye Bitches and the Professor's Alliance. For some reason, they did not trust her at all, so they kept her at an arm's length, and when the red blindside happened, Bowie Jane realized that she needed to make new allies, so she did flip to the other side with the Izzy vote. She got closer to Matt and Jag, while having a good enough relationship with Cameron, so her path to the end was easy. Once she got in that final three, she started playing for Matt and Jag, and not really herself, as she let them convince her to boot Cameron when it was not in her best interest, and really enabled them. Bowie won 3 HOHs in the season, if I remember correctly, so she had a lot of power and had a lot of chances to create her own agency, but she had no agency and absolutely no respect in the house. She wasn't good strategically, though it's good at ditching sinking Titanics, was a mixed bag at best socially, and was good in competitions. The bottom of the mediocre tier fits her. At 19th is America from Big Brother 25. She's someone who really wanted to be an iconic player, and you can really feel how disappointed and frustrated she was that things did not go her way throughout the season. While America was brought into the right side of the house in the beginning, it was clear that she was at the bottom of that alliance and really wasn't trusted by them. The issue is, she had no relationships with the other side of the house on a personal or strategic level either, so she was put on limbo and made it through because there were bigger targets in the house. Getting closer to Corey definitely helped her position in the game, as he gave her a lot of information that she wasn't privy to, and she was one of the few people who helped him realize that he was not as in with the three of the house, or the three side of the house, as he thought. While she did get him to flip during the Izzy vote and finally convinced Cameron about what was happening, she did not have the power to pull off the flip herself. When it did happen, she and Corey just took a backseat for the next several weeks and let the game play around them, whereas she was blindsided when things went poorly for the pair. America started lashing out and there really was no path for her. She was not good in competitions, she wasn't good socially, and while she has strategic acumen, there was a lack of respect there and she had no influence with her, and I don't know if she would improve on another season. At 18th is Felicia. Most people did not expect Felicia to make it as far as she did in the season, but they did not expect her to be so involved in the strategy and gameplay of the season, though I do think that it's mainly because there were a lot of older people on the season. She got in good with the Bye Bye Bitches and the Professor's Alliance, and the house did like her, but she did make off moves, like backdooring Kissam on her HOH, which she admits later on in the season was a mistake, running her mouth about information that people should not have, and she was gross at times, which rubbed people the wrong way. There were weeks where she was put on the block, and she was going home for most of the week, and she stayed both weeks due to nothing of her own doing. Felicia would sell out her allies at various points in the season in hopes of getting closer with the people in power, and it didn't really work. Felicia was better in competitions than I remembered. She was better socially than expected, though she did burn bridges with various people in the season, and I do think she was more impressive strategically, but she often did not got in her own way. Felicia is just all over the place, which is kind of why she's on the lower end of this tier, as she isn't really bad, but isn't good slash solid either, and I do think that this season was her best case scenario, as I do see her being booted earlier on a lot of other seasons. So at 17th is Brittany from Big Brother 24. I cannot believe Brittany is this high on the list, compared to the people from her era of Big Brother. Anyways, she was a part of the Girls Girls Alliance, but they soon kicked her out of it due to her selling Emir out and just in general being very annoying. She did get close to Michael and got closer to Taylor throughout the season, and she was in a pretty poor position before the leftovers came to be, which did put her in a position of power. At the same time, she was at the bottom of that alliance as well, which she did recognize, but she never put in any active work to improve her position within the alliance and to make stronger relationships with people in and out of the alliance. Of course, there was the whole Cal mess, and while she did warn Michael about how he needed to make a big move, he ignored her strategic advice and she started leaking a bunch of information slash planting seeds, which failed. Often. Brittany's paranoia got her in a lot of trouble, especially later on in the season, and she let it blind her, like trying to vote out Taylor and then pissing Monty off in the last 2 weeks of the house. She was not the best in competitions, she wasn't good socially throughout the season, and I do think she had good moments strategically, but her paranoia got the best of her, and she actively played for second place and for Michael to win the entire season. So yeah, I'm definitely docking her for that. I see her being booted earlier on most seasons, since accountability is not there for her to improve as a player, and she has a lot of flaws that she seemingly doesn't like to recognize. At 16th is Joseph from Big Brother 24. My opinion on him as a player went down after rewatching the season, and I didn't think highly of him as a player during my initial rewatch. He was very close to being the replacement nominee target in the first week because he refused to speak game to people and didn't have many alliances with people. The ones he was in an alliance with was either fake or they all saw him as expendable. Things turned around for him when the leftover alliance was formed, and he played a good secondary role in making that happen and helping get Emira out. He was in a powerful, safe alliance that would have carried him far, and his social relationships with the house guests in general really grew. Instead of letting his social game carry him throughout the season, he decided to pretend to be double agent, which only worsened his position within his alliance, and he gave them all of his ammunition, where double agents tend to keep certain things to himself and place both sides against one another, which he didn't do. And he was blind to his alliance being ready to cut him, while also volunteering to be the replacement nominee on Taylor's HOH, where he most likely goes home. He clearly did this since he wanted to cover his butt with the other side of the house, but it was pointless since they were going to find out about the alliance anyways, and he wasn't actively using any of this information to his advantage. While the split house twist caused him to go home, I think his time was running out very soon anyways. He wasn't good at competitions, he improved socially where he became pretty solid in that element, and was a mess at best strategically, and I don't see him improving as a player. At 15th is Turner from Big Brother 24. He was another person that I found unimpressive during the season and continued finding him unimpressive during the rewatch. Turner was in a bad position at the beginning of the season as he rejected alliances with Brittany and Michael to their faces while gluing himself to Pooch, who was in a poor position and was in a fake alliance with a few of the guys. He was out of the loop and would have been the next target had he not won the Week 3 HOH, where he wanted to boot Taylor, which would have done nothing for his game as they were both outsiders, but he had to be convinced by the other guys to boot Amira once the leftovers became an alliance. Turner was in a good position while that alliance was in power, and it was clear that he needed a leader to follow. It was first Pooch, then it became Kyle once the former was booted, and then when Kyle was booted, it became Monty, who Turner followed for the rest of the season. It became clear that Turner had no idea what he was doing and would do whatever the last person he spoke to wanted him to do, which we saw with Kyle during his second HOH before Kyle's race scandal came into play, and Monty had to convince Turner to send home Michael on his final HOH and convinced him to boot Alyssa over Taylor, knowing that it was a bad move for Turner. Due to his passivity and lack of agency, Turner was seen as someone who had no moves, and he had no respect in the jury house, especially with him voting out Alyssa, who was better for his endgame over Taylor. He was good in competitions, got better socially, though I don't know if I would say it was good, and is weak strategically, but I don't know if he has what it takes to grow as a player to be in the higher tiers. At 14th is Derek X from Big Brother 23. For someone who knew absolutely nothing about Big Brother before entering the season, he got onto the game very quickly, which is a good trait in a Big Brother player. He did start pretty poorly, since he spent a majority of his time with Travis on the first week, and he was going to be backdoored in the first week, before he won the veto. After that, and essentially choosing Kind over Travis, things started improving for him since he started making a lot of important relationships and was able to relax quite a bit, though he continued winning competitions where he didn't need to win them, which would eventually be his undoing. Derek found himself in the Royal Flush Alliance, where a lot of his other teammates were isolated, and he was the one who broke it up, since he wanted to backdoor his biggest competitive threat in Christian, where I don't know if this was the best move, since he pissed off all the kings, and it just caused him to be the standout competitor, who would need to be backdoored, which is exactly what happened. You can definitely say that the cookout hindered his game, since Hannah and Tiffany was probably going to be more loyal to him than them without that factor, but I do think he was way too naive and overconfident about his position, which we saw when he did not purchase a twist during the week that he actively needed it. I can't say that he is strong strategically, but his social and competitive skills has him on the higher end of this tier, and I could easily see him improving a lot if he were to return or if he was on another season. At 13th is Claire from Big Brother 23. I remember a lot of people having high expectations of Claire, since she was a superfan, though that was more of Survivor, but she knew a lot about Big Brother as well, and I will say that she was doing fine enough in the beginning. She was of course close to Tiffany, had good relationships with Kenneth and Sarah Beth at the time, and was overall a pleasant person who laid low during the first few weeks. Luckily for her, the slaughterhouse fell apart immediately, since that group was thinking of her as a target, and she was brought into the Royal Flush Alliance, where she was able to build good relationships with Alyssa and Christian as well. We saw some signs early on of Claire being a bit too passive, despite her knowing what moves needed to be made, but it never really appeared until later on in the season, even though she did have close relationships with people like Kyland and Hannah, or at least at certain point in the season. She was a target during Kyland's second HOH in early jury, and there were a lot of people who did want her out to weaken Tiffany, and she used her secret HOH power to make the move that Tiffany already made, though she knew that was not the move that she herself needed to make, and was not more aggressive in getting Xavier out. Ultimately, Tiffany had to be the one to take her out due to the cookout. Claire was very poor in competitions and was competent enough strategically and socially, but she was self-aware, and without the cookout and being accountable, and with her being an extremely accountable person, I could see her doing a lot better on other seasons, though the passivity is something that might be something she struggles with improving on. So at 12th is Alyssa from Big Brother 23. She is a very weird and an interesting one to talk about when it comes to the game. Alyssa was nominated because she was assumed to be in a showmatch with Christian, which wasn't even a thing at that time yet. But she was able to get Frenchie on her side and did go to work to make sure that she was safe, so she handled the block well. Alyssa was able to build strong relationships with people like Xavier and Christian, and was also close enough to Tiffany and Claire earlier on in the season, where the Royal Flush Alliance put her in a really good position. But Her team in the Kings was too threatening, and it became the fake out due to the cookout, where it would have been the real alliance in any other season. After the Christian boot took place, Alyssa fought to make sure that she was in a decent enough position where she was not targeted. But after that, she ended up heavily clinging onto Xavier and really took her foot off the gas since she isolated herself with him for the next few weeks and was pretty much a sitting duck. In her final week, she did win the veto to save herself, and we did see her getting closer to a lot of the other cookout members, so she turned it back on when she realized that she was in danger, which is a skill that I've noticed with her throughout the season. Alyssa was okay competitively, as she was close in a bunch of competitions, but only won 2 vetoes, had solid strategic moments when she was active, and was very social when she was active. But clearly, the issue with her is that she ranges from being active to inactive too much. I think Alyssa can be very cutthroat, and I think the cookout was the biggest handicap of her, especially compared to the other non-cookout members, where I think she probably does better on a lot of seasons. So at 11th, I have Taylor from Big Brother 24. Alrighty, I made it very clear about what I feel about her as a player. I don't think she's a good player, and I think a lot of what people say about her game is revisionist history, solely because she won. Taylor came into the house and she rubbed people the wrong way, where some of it was due to preconceived notions, definitely, and some of it was due to her weird way of conversing at times, but it ended up with her being on her way out of the house if it wasn't for Paloma quitting and the twist of the week protecting her. Even after that, she was the secondary target and didn't realize it, but stayed due to others playing around her. Turner was about to send her home the third week before she was pulled into the Leftovers Alliance as a number, and she was safe for the majority of the season after that. After this, she mainly just hung out with Joseph, Michael, and Brittany within that alliance, didn't have much say about anything that was going on, and her reads were just consistently off. Her first HOH was horrendous because she was so scatterbrained, influenced by Joseph, and was trying to make good TV, over promising where she couldn't even keep up with those promises, and then Joseph put her in a bad position before he left. After the calmness happened, she and Monty got a lot closer strategically as well as romantically, and there was the Michael thing where she had a part of that move, but she wasn't the one who convinced Turner to send him home when Michael went home. There's not much to say gameplay wise because she tried to keep Brittany on her HOH and failed at doing that, just like she did with Indy, and Taylor needed to be taken to the end, and whenever she tried to have agency/control over the game, she never got what she wanted. I think she's a mixed bag socially, as she did improve, but I still think she has a lot of holes in this element, was pretty poor strategically, and is decent in competitions. In general, I think she had a lot of luck and outside factors that gave her the win, and I don't know if she can improve on her faults to really be an upper tier player. The final person in this tier at 10th is Hannah. I think a lot of people wanted to prop her up due to her association with Tiffany, and while I don't think Hannah is a bad player, I don't really think she's a good player either. Before she was really included in the Cookout Alliance, Hannah did not have much relationships with people and was outside of the mature structures and dynamics that were being formed during the early portion of the season. She came off like a know-it-all to a lot of people, and her reads were really poor before Tiffany really took her under her wing, brought Hannah into the Cookout Alliance seriously, and caught her up on the dynamics of the gang. She did convince Christian to not target her during his HOH, and she did help Tiffany with a lot of the plans for the cookout in the season. She did improve her social game, and we did see her win some competitions later on in the season, proving that she was a mental threat in competitions. At the same time, she really had no agency for herself, as she tossed Derek to the side way too early and was more than willing to go to the end with the cookout, not even thinking of the path that she would win with that alliance, and knowing that she would lose, and I think she was the only person who would take Tiffany to the end. Even Claire planned on cutting Tiffany before the final two. So Hannah ended up getting booted 5th, which is well deserved. Despite her mediocre run on the season, I do think that she could actually perform a lot better on another season, since she has more life experience and is a lot more involved in the BB alumni and covering the show and understanding it in a different way, hence her being at the top of this tier, pretty much. So the first person in this tier at 9th is Michael from Big Brother 24. I honestly never expected Michael to be this high on the list, since I don't think highly of the Big Brother 24 cast in general, and that's the case specifically with Michael. He wanted to play a floater-like social game, but he never put in the effort to be able to play like that. He stuck with Brittany and to a lesser extent Taylor and Kyle throughout the entire season, didn't build relationships with many people, but was pulled into some early alliances due to his quote unquote innocent luck, and he went out of his way to win a bunch of competitions that he didn't need to win. He was the target in week 1, so he needed it for that week. Michael was in the leftover alliance, which put him in a good position, but he didn't build relationships with a lot of them. Whenever he won HOH, he in general made the safe move, which isn't a bad thing, but it became a problem in his final HOH, where one of Monty or Turner needed to go for his game, but he wasted it on Terrence. And then there was him weaponizing Cal's race scandal for gameplay and not owning up to it. He knows what to do for the game, is brilliant at competitions, one of the best, if not the best, in that category, and is kind of meh socially, but executing his strategies is where he is mixed on, so he's on the lower end of the solid tier overall. At 8 is Corey from Big Brother 25. Honestly, I never thought that he was going to be this high on the list, and I never even thought that he would make it on this tier when I first started rewatching the season. Corey was isolated during the first few hours of the game, and he was already nominated, but he was able to get in good with Riley, where she saved him, and was good with people from both sides of the house. Corey had quite a bit of alliances, and got close to the fields, so he was very well insulated for the first few weeks of the season, while getting rid of his biggest threats like Hissam, when his allies wanted to keep the ladder. It was somewhere after the first month of the season where he became a bit too passive and complacent in his position of the season, but he needed America to wake him up about his position, as well as deteriorating relationship with Jared, or that he didn't realize was deteriorating at the time until this point, which caused that huge blow up. Corey was able to flip the Alliance Empire from the bye-bye bitches, but he sat back for the next several weeks, where Matt and Jag took advantage of the empty ceiling and positioning to create their new power structure. While he was close to Jag, he was almost backdoored, was weaponized to target Blue and for her to target him, and he was saved that week due to nothing of his own doing, and was booted 2 weeks later, though it was a result of the double veto, though he might have just been nominated under normal circumstances anyways as the replacement. Corey did have a strong social game, and he had a solid grasp on strategy, but he got very passive at various points in the season, and he wasn't strong in competitions. I do think he would be a better player, especially if he was a bit older, and he does have self-awareness working on his side. At 7th is Monty from Big Brother 24. Monty is definitely a weird one to talk about, now that I am really thinking about it. He was very well positioned at the beginning of the season, as he was with the post-pack alliance that was running things, and he had a lot of good relationships with the guys, but how he handled the Taylor/Paloma situation was a sign of some of his sloppier gameplay. Despite that, he continued with his good position, though the alliance showed some cracks, so he and Kyle ended up flipping from that alliance and started the leftovers, though he himself was not a huge reason as to why this ended up happening. After his HOH, where he did get out Nicole, something about his position changed, and a bunch of people were targeting him around this point. But because he laid back for a few weeks, that target, especially with the people in his alliance, shifted towards Joseph. After that, Monty was about to be sent home before the cow mess saved his butt, and he took over Cal's position of running Turner, essentially, where he had Turner and Taylor at his endgame. He was the one who booted Michael, or had that happen, and started winning the endgame competitions, where he controlled the endgame, but he made a poor decision in the final 3 of booting Turner over Taylor. I think Monty is pretty solid strategically and socially, though people did mention that he was kind of like a politician when it comes to the social element, but he gets very passive at times and does not have the most awareness, while being solid in competitions as well. In general, he's just solid. Nothing better and nothing worse. At 6th is Kyle from Big Brother 24. It is extremely frustrating to have Kyle this high on the list, since I find a lot of his gameplay to have nefarious reasons and rationale, even some of his earlier moves that aren't really discussed much. Cal made a lot of relationships with people in the house, where he was put in a lot of the alliances, as he was a part of the Pulse Pack crew, had good relationships with most of the guys in the house, and even had relationships with Michael and Brittany early on, which was pivotal in the formation of the Leftovers. While he was rubbed the wrong way about Nicole and Amira during the second week and them getting pooch out, I am wondering if he was rubbed the wrong way partially due to their complexion, as he showed continued uncomfortability regarding that in other situations with other people throughout the season. Despite being in a very good position with the Leftovers Alliance, he got annoyed with some of his allies for wanting to target Alyssa, though he was the one who directed them to do it in the first place. He created a PLC alliance in his head, which did not exist, and they were all targeting one another. And while he pulled a great move off during the Die Fest week and making a new alliance, the ickiness behind it was too much, and it bit him in the butt when Michael and Brittany weaponized it, since he made it clear that he was not going to work with the two of them anymore. Cal showed a lot of great social skills and has a natural adaptability regarding strategy, as well as strategic insights to really be a good player, and he was okay in competitions. But the stuff above caused a massive fall for him, and while he did apologize, it came off as performative, and I don't know if he would truly improve as a player and his faults on another season. At fifth is Matt from Big Brother 25. He is someone who absolutely knew nothing about the show before going into the house, and that was definitely clear in the beginning. Certain terminology he did not get, he grouped up with a lot of the younger people in the house, he did not hide who he was working with whatsoever, and it did build a target on him, but he was lucky that people did not listen to his song. As soon as it was clear that his alliance was going downhill, we did see him integrate with the Professor's alliance by getting close to Sari and making those connections with other people, where he was essentially included in their alliance and all their fake alliances, and he ended up replacing the likes of Hassam, Red, Bowie Jane, and even Corey in those relationships and alliances. Matt really developed good social bonds with most of the people in the house and was able to save his ally Jag with the twist and not have people be mad at him for it, and consistently sold people out to the people in power so they can have trust with him and so others can be weakened. The flip that happened with the Issy Boot was perfect for his and Jag's game, and it was perfect for them to steamroll the rest of the season, and it was mainly his connections that caused people to want to work with them, and directed what happened in the last part of the season, where he helped Jag with a lot of the moves. The issue with Matt is that he really fumbled the bag during his HOH, letting Jag and Bowie Jane outplay him with booting Sari, knowing that it would weaken him, and he really could not explain himself at the end of the season, or in the goodbye messages, which indicates that he might not have been very intentional with his moves. I could see him making it far on most seasons, but I don't think he would improve strategically, hence him only being in this tier. At fourth is Xavier from Big Brother 23. We have our first black winner in the main US show, and it kinda seemed telegraphed for him specifically. There were 6 people of African descent for the first time ever, and with the civil rights Black Lives Matter movement happening, they all agreed to work together. He was tied in with his alliance, specifically Christian and Alyssa, and was able to get into the Royal Flush Alliance, where they did run most of the pre-jury of the season, though he was really taken aback with Christian being booted right at the end of that period of the season. Once the jury portion of the season started, a lot of people outside of the cookout was targeting him because they saw him as such a threat and a winner, and it really was the cookout that was why he was able to make it through the early jury. For weeks, he kind of just isolated himself with Alyssa, and they stuck with the plan that Tiffany created with the parachute stuff. What I will say about Xavier is that he managed his relationships with his alliance very well, to the point where most of them wanted to take him to the end, and use people, quote unquote, not being the good representative as to why some people should be targeted, and there are all people who are targeting him, essentially, in the alliance. While I think he had a solid strategy, there were some moments where he was truly out of the loop compared to others, and I do think he was pretty strong socially and competitively, to the point where he's kind of just the textbook good player who makes it far and would be an ideal winner. I don't know if he could repeat a performance like this on other seasons, especially on a season that isn't catered to him, due to fitting, quote-unquote, respectability politics the most out of all the black/mixed with black house guests on his season. The final person in this tier at third and the bronze prince for the era goes to Kylan from Big Brother 24. It is crazy that he is so high compared to people in this era, though I do think that it's mainly because I think the Big Brother 24 and Big Brother 25 casts are extremely weak on a strategic gameplay point of view, so it definitely benefited him. Kylan was a part of the Slaughterhouse Alliance, so was Xavier, which I forgot to mention in Xavier's section, though he did end up getting nominated in the first week. But he is able to get Derek X to veto him off the block, and choose him over Travis. He did win the next HOH, where he was able to control the direction and structure of the rest of the season, booted Frenchie, and was able to get all of his closest people to align into the Royal Flush Alliance, which was very good for him. Of course, he was a part of the cookout and was the second most important person in the alliance, as he had a lot of influence that caused the alliance to be protected, as he was the one who convinced Derek X to target Christian, the person Cannon was the least close to in the Royal Flush Alliance and dismantling the Royal Flush Alliance, and was able to convince Sarah Beth to take out Derek X, who was closer to Tiffany and Hannah, weakening them, so he got rid of two of the best competitors in the house that weren't the closest to him compared to some of the others, though he and Derek X had a close relationship, but it just wasn't as close to some of the others. Kylan has the entire package, as he is great in competitions, is solid socially, and is good strategically. But he would be better and probably in the good tier if he was not so egocentric and kind of arrogant. Kylan believes in taking the quote-unquote best people to the end and thinks that everyone else has that mentality, so when people do not exhibit that, he gets condescending and speaks to people poorly, which rubs them the wrong way. I honestly don't see him improving on his faults at all, just based on how he acts in and outside of the house, so he has a ceiling pertaining his skill set and gameplay potential. So the silver prize of second, and one of the only two people in the good tier from this era, is Suri from Big Brother 25. Seeing Suri in the Big Brother house was a sight to behold, as we watched her work live and using the antics that she used on Survivor, but it's different watching an edited product that completed months earlier, knowing the results, and seeing her work live 24/7, and the result of the season is not completed yet, was so mouth-watering. People knew she was a legend in Survivor, but no one targeted her, though Suri had her son in the house, which would soon be a disadvantage. Everyone in the house loved her and wanted to work with her, which gave Suri a lot of options, even though she created the Professors and the Bye Bye Bitches alliances. Having a lot of these options caused her to make a lot of fake alliances where I don't even remember most of the names, where she could barely keep up with any of them, and it caused her to boot loyal allies like Hisam and Red, which were not good moves, which she recognized in hindsight, and it all eventually caught up with her, mainly due to the messiness of her son and slightly Izzy. Suri lost all of her allies, or her closest allies, and power structure around the middle of the season, and had to go under the radar in the second half of the season, while building some of her connections with people like Matt, and even kissing up to some of the others. A part of her was most definitely checked out, but she was playing well enough from the bottom of the season, and she was surviving as people wanted her and Felicia's votes throughout several votes, and they had alliances offered to them. Despite this, Suri was booted at the endgame since she cannot win a single competition, though she came close a few times. I think Suri is solid strategically, though she suffered since she's not used to the pacing of Big Brother, and brilliant socially, one of the best ever, but competitions were her weak point, and oddly enough, I can see her repeating a similar path if she's on another BB season, since she's just that good and knows how to seem unthreatening. And the gold prize of first place from this era goes to Tiffany from Big Brother 23. It is not a surprise that I rank Tiffany the highest in the current era, but I do think it says something, since the highest person in this era is nowhere near as close to the highest people in the other three eras. Anyways, Tiffany was making social connections everywhere from the very beginning of the season, and was very observant with what was happening in the house strategically and all the dynamics that were taking place. The cookout came to be very early on in the season, and it was initially an agreement for the people of African descent to protect one another until jury, and for Tiffany's came, that should have stayed that way. She was conflicted about whether she should stick with this alliance or stick with people like Claire, Derek X, and the other World Flushers, essentially. She essentially used the brigade strategy of each of them having a parachute, where they could control all the votes, and then the parachute would be booted over the cookout members. Tiffany started struggling since she really wanted to keep people like Christian and Derek X around, but it would piss off her alliance, especially Asa and Derek F, which was a consistent thing throughout the season as she just didn't have good relationships with them, and it caused people to see her as selfish, where she was starting to lose agency as the season went on. While she played for the Alliance to go to the end, she did try to keep all of her side pieces, and her not throwing the final 8 really sealed her fate, as she had to boot Claire once Alyssa vetoed herself, knowing that she herself would go home at 6. I think Tiffany has a great social game, and is good at the strategic elements, though the competitions was mostly her weakest suit, though she wasn't as weak in competitions as I thought she was going to be. I think the moral dilemma really got to her, and it affected her a lot, as I do think she would have played better had the element of what was happening in real life with black people was not a factor. Weirdly enough, I don't think she would be targeted on another season, or at least not early on, since she has a way of seeming very trustworthy and unthreatening, and getting involved more in the alumni especially too. Alrighty, so that is my ranking of everyone in this new diversity era from Big Brother 23 to Big Brother 25. I think this video might be just as long as the first era tier ranking, if I remember correctly, which says a lot since this is half of the seasons, but I guess since the game has evolved so much compared to that first era, which is pretty much 2 decades ago at this point, there's a lot more to cover. I really can't believe that I finished ranking every player and every era. Of course, I'm going to do a culminative list of everyone on Big Brother US history, of course not including BB9 Neo, to rank everyone to see where they will rank, but that won't be until around the time, or if not, during the airing of Big Brother 26, so you'll have to wait a few more months for that. I am planning on releasing a video of where I rank every BB Can player, obviously not including Amal from BB Can 11 or the BB Can 8 cast. That should be up in a few weeks, hopefully. I'm still working on my Big Brother Canada seasons, categories, rankings. I'm working on some more Big Brother 20 compilation videos, and I do have some other non-Big Brother content in the works, and I am working on a video about the sexuality in Big Brother. Hopefully, I finally get around to completing the Big Brother Where Are They Now videos, but if not, hopefully that won't be the case. Anyways, you can subscribe at the bottom, you can like the video, you can follow me on my Twitter at Lala_Annie, and you can watch my other videos of Big Brother US content, or even some of my Big Brother Canada content as well. Thank you all for following, and I'll be posting something soon. Take care!